The morning of the games dawned hot and merciless over Rome, the sun beating down on marble and stone until the city seemed to shimmer like a mirage. Livia stood among the masses streaming toward the Colosseum, her worn sandals kicking up dust from streets that had seen 1,000 such processions, 1,000 days of blood and spectacle designed to keep the people entertained and compliant. She had not wanted to come. For 5 years she had avoided the arena, unable to bear the sight of the place that had taken everything from her. But today was different. Today marked the anniversary of Marcus's death, and tradition demanded she honor his memory at the site where he had fallen. The priest said it would bring peace to his spirit, would help him find rest in whatever afterlife awaited gladiators who died for Rome's amusement. Livia knew better. There was no peace for those who died in the sand, no rest for men butchered while crowds cheered. But she came anyway, because even false ritual was better than the crushing emptiness that had defined her existence since the day they carried his broken body from the arena. Hero. They had called him a hero. Marcus had been no hero. He had been a slave, a man captured in Rome's endless wars and forced to fight for entertainment. He had killed because the alternative was death, had survived bout after bout, not from any love of violence, but from a desperate desire to live long enough to earn his freedom, to return to the small farm they had dreamed of. But freedom never came. In his 43rd fight, facing a Thracian warrior whose skill with the curved Sika was legendary, Marcus had finally fallen. Livia had not been there to see it, but she had heard the details. How Marcus had fought bravely, how he had nearly won, how in the end the Thracian's blade had found the gap between helmet and shoulder guard, severing the artery in his neck, how he had died quickly at least, drowning in his own blood while the crowd roared. They had let her see the body after, once they had cleaned most of the blood away. She had knelt beside him in the preparation room beneath the arena, had touched his cold face, had whispered goodbye to a man who could no longer hear her. Then they had taken him away for cremation and given her his ashes in a simple urn. 5 years. 5 years of surviving on laundry work and occasional charity. 5 years of waking each morning to emptiness. She could still remember Marcus's face, but sometimes she had to concentrate to recall the exact shade of his eyes, the precise timbre of his voice. Time was stealing him from her piece by piece. The crowd pressed closer as they approached the Colosseum, thousands of bodies packed together in anticipation. Livia let herself be carried along, too tired to fight against it, too numb to care where she ended up. Around her, people chattered excitedly about today's special games. The emperor himself would attend, making one of his rare public appearances. There would be a grand procession, a display of imperial power and military might. Livia cared nothing for emperors or processions. She found a spot in the upper tiers where the common people sat and waited for the ceremonies to begin. From here, she could see the entire arena spread below, the sand raked smooth and fresh, the gates behind which animals and fighters waited. Trumpets sounded, their brazen call echoing off the Colosseum's walls, and the crowd rose as the emperor's procession began. First came the Praetorian Guard, 50 men in gleaming armor marching in perfect formation, their red cloaks flowing like blood. Then the senators, walking with self-important dignity. Musicians followed, playing martial hymns, and then came the emperor's personal retinue, his bodyguards, his advisors, his enforcers. These were not ordinary Praetorians, but something else, an elite unit that served only the emperor's most sensitive needs. They wore black armor instead of the traditional red, their helmets designed to obscure their faces, and they moved with a predatory grace that made even the regular soldiers seem clumsy in comparison. Livia watched without interest, her mind elsewhere, remembering the last time she had seen Marcus alive, the morning before his final fight. He had been nervous, which was unusual. He had held her longer than usual, had kissed her with an intensity that spoke of premonition or dread. "If something happens to me," he had said, and she had pressed her fingers to his lips, refusing to hear it. "Nothing will happen," she had insisted. "You will win, as you always do." But he had not won, and now he was ash in an urn, and she was alone in a city that cared nothing for widows or grief. The emperor's enforcers were passing directly below her section now, and despite herself, Livia found her eyes drawn to them. There was something unsettling about the way they moved, something that suggested they were more than simply well-trained soldiers. They seemed to flow rather than march, their movements too fluid, too predatory. One of them turned his head, scanning the crowd. His helmet had a fuller visor than the others, but there was something about the way he held himself, something in the set of his shoulders that triggered a memory so deep and visceral that Livia's breath caught. Then he looked up, and their eyes met. Golden eyes. Not brown or hazel or any natural human color, but pure metallic gold, gleaming in the sunlight like coins fresh from the mint. Eyes that should not exist, could not exist, yet there they were, staring directly at her from a face she knew better than her own. Marcus. The world tilted beneath Livia's feet. Sound faded to a distant roar. All she could see were those impossible golden eyes in a face that was both familiar and alien. The face of a man she had mourned for 5 years, a man whose ashes sat in an urn in her room, a man who was supposed to be dead. But he was not dead. He was here, walking in the Emperor's procession, wearing black armor and moving with inhuman grace. His eyes fixed on hers with an expression she could not interpret. Recognition, yes, she saw that clearly, but also something else. Warning, apology, desperation. The moment lasted perhaps 3 heartbeats, though it felt like an eternity. Then Marcus looked away, turning his attention back to the procession, and continued walking as if nothing had happened. Around her, people were pointing and whispering. The Emperor's beasts. They say he keeps them in the catacombs. Neither man nor animal, but something cursed. They cannot die. They heal from any wound. Livia barely heard them. Her hands gripped the stone railing, her knuckles white, her heart hammered against her ribs. This was not possible. Marcus was dead. She had seen his body, had held his cold hand, had watched as they carried him away for cremation. But those eyes, she would know those eyes anywhere, even transformed into something inhuman and terrible. Those were Marcus's eyes, Marcus's face beneath that concealing helmet. The procession completed its circuit and filed out through the gates, disappearing into the tunnels beneath the Colosseum. The crowd settled back, the games about to begin, but Livia remained standing, staring at the place where Marcus had vanished. If Marcus lived, why had they told her he was dead? Whose ashes rested in the urn in her room? And what had been done to him to transform a human gladiator into whatever creature she had just seen? She thought of whispered rumors she had heard over the years, stories dismissed as superstition. Stories about the Emperor's secret experiments, about gladiators who died in the arena but did not stay dead, about creatures kept in the deepest tunnels who served Rome's darkest purposes. The beast. They called him the Emperor's beast. Whatever had been done to Marcus, whatever curse or transformation or dark magic had been worked upon him, it had turned him into something that was neither fully human nor fully animal. But for just a moment, he had looked at her with eyes that remembered love. Livia sat down slowly, her legs no longer able to support her. Around her, the games began, but she saw none of it. All she could see were golden eyes in a face she had thought lost forever. And if he lived, then she would find him. No matter what he had become, no matter what had been done to him, she would find the man she had loved and discover the truth. The games continued, the crowd roared, and Livia began to plan. Livia remained in her seat long after most of the crowd had departed, the sun descending toward the western hills and painting the Colosseum stones in shades of blood and gold. The games had ended hours ago, but Livia had witnessed none of it, her mind replaying endlessly that single moment when golden eyes had met hers across the arena. Marcus, alive, impossible, yet undeniable. As the shadows lengthened and the last stragglers filed out, Livia finally moved. Her legs were stiff from sitting so long, but her purpose burned clear and bright. She would not leave this place without answers. She would not return to her empty room and her urn of ashes that now seemed like a lie. She made her way down from the upper tiers, moving against the flow of departing spectators. The lower levels were reserved for the wealthy, seats cushioned and shaded. Livia had never been in this section before, but now she walked through the marble corridors as if she belonged there, her determined stride suggesting she had every right to be present. Guards watched her pass with mild confusion, but none moved to stop her. Livia reached the lower levels without challenge. Here, the architecture changed. Polished marble gave way to rougher stone, broad corridors narrowing into passages designed for functionality. These were the working areas, where animals were housed, where gladiators prepared, where the mechanisms creating the arena's effects were operated by slaves in darkness. And somewhere in these tunnels, Marcus waited. Livia tried several doors, finding storage rooms filled with weapons, chambers where animal handlers kept their tools, She moved deeper, following instincts more than actual knowledge, trusting that somehow she would find what she sought. "You should not be here." The voice came from behind her, low and rough. Livia spun around and found herself facing one of the Emperor's enforcers, still in his black armor though he had removed his helmet. His face was scarred, hardened by violence, with eyes that held no warmth. But they were human eyes, brown and ordinary, not the impossible gold she had seen. "I am looking for someone," Livia said, forcing her voice steady. "One of your unit." "I saw him during the procession." The enforcer's expression did not change. "The Emperor's beasts do not receive visitors. Leave now, before I have you arrested." "Please," Livia said, desperation overriding caution. "His name is Marcus. He was a gladiator. He died 5 years ago, but I saw him today. I just need to speak with him." "The dead do not return," the enforcer interrupted flatly. "Whatever you think you saw, you were mistaken. Now leave." He reached for her arm, but before his hand could close on her wrist, another voice spoke from the shadows. "Let her pass, Quintus." The voice was Marcus's, and yet not Marcus's. The timbre was the same, but something fundamental had changed. It was rougher now, strained, as if speaking required effort that had once been effortless. The enforcer called Quintus froze. "The Emperor's orders." "I said let her pass." The command carried weight that made Quintus step back despite his obvious reluctance. He shot Livia a dark look, then turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing until they faded to silence. Livia stood alone in the dim corridor, her heart pounding. From the shadows ahead, a figure emerged, moving with that same predatory grace she had noticed during the procession. He was tall. Marcus had always been tall, but he seemed larger now, his shoulders broader, his presence somehow more imposing. And then he stepped fully into the light, and Livia saw his face. It was Marcus. The same strong jawline, the same nose broken in his 10th fight, the same scar above his left eyebrow. But his skin was paler than she remembered, with a faint grayish cast. His hair, once dark brown, now showed streaks of silver. And his eyes, gods, his eyes, they were golden, gleaming with an inner light. But more than the color, it was what lay behind them. A wildness, a barely restrained ferocity that reminded her of caged lions. Marcus looked at her with those terrible, beautiful eyes, and she saw both the man she had loved and something else, something that wore his face but was no longer entirely human. "Livia," he said, and the pain in his voice nearly broke her. "You should not have come. You should not have recognized me. You should have let me stay dead. But you are not dead," Livia whispered, taking a step toward him. "Marcus, what happened to you? What did they do?" He turned away, as if unable to bear her gaze. "They made me one of them. The Emperor's beasts. Neither man nor animal, but something cursed. Something trapped between life and death. A weapon that cannot die." "I do not understand," Livia said, moving closer. "You died in the arena. I saw your body." "I did die," Marcus interrupted. "The Thracian's blade found my neck, and I bled out in the sand. I felt myself dying, felt the darkness closing in, and then I woke in the catacombs beneath the arena, surrounded by priests and alchemists and the Emperor's physicians. They had brought me back, Livia. Brought me back from death itself using methods that should not exist." He turned to face her again, and she saw tears gleaming in those golden eyes. "They injected me with something, blood mixed with alchemical compounds, fluids extracted from beasts, essence drawn from creatures that exist only in the Empire's darkest laboratories. It burned like liquid fire. For 3 days I existed in agony, while my body died and was reborn, while my flesh transformed into something that could heal from any wound, that possessed strength beyond human limits." "Why?" Livia asked, her own tears flowing. "Why would they do such a thing?" "Because the Emperor wanted warriors who could not be killed," Marcus said bitterly. "Enforcers who could carry out his darkest orders without fear of death. We are his monsters, Livia. His beasts kept in cages and released only when he needs something terrible done." He stepped closer, and Livia could see the tension in his body, the way his muscles trembled. "But the transformation came with a price. I am no longer fully human. The beast blood they put in me gave me strength and regeneration, but it also gave me urges, hunger, the need to hunt, to kill. During the full moon, I lose control completely, become more animal than man. They keep me chained during those nights, locked in the deepest cages. His golden eyes met hers. I wanted to find you, to tell you I lived, but they forbid it. Said I was dead to my old life, that Livia the widow must never know. They even held a false cremation, gave you ashes from some other dead gladiator. I do not care, Livia said fiercely, closing the distance and reaching for his face with trembling hands. I do not care what you have become or what they did to you. You are Marcus. You are my husband, and I will not lose you again. She touched his scarred skin, cold, trembling beneath her fingers, and felt the truth of his words. This was not the warm flesh of a living man, but something else, something suspended between life and death. But beneath the cold and the curse and the golden eyes, she felt his heart beating, felt the shudder that ran through him at her touch, felt the desperate need that matched her own. They will not let you have me back, Marcus whispered, but he did not pull away. The Emperor owns me. I am his property, his weapon, his beast. There is no escape, Livia. Then we will find a way, Livia said, her voice fierce. I found you once. I will not accept that we must remain apart now. Marcus closed his eyes, and a sound escaped him that might have been laughter or a sob. You always were stubborn. Even when the odds were impossible, you refused to accept defeat. And I will not accept it now, Livia replied. Tell me what we must do. Tell me how to free you. Marcus opened his golden eyes and looked at her with an expression that combined love and despair. I do not know if there is a way, but if there is, we will need to face the one who made me what I am. We will need to confront the Emperor himself. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with danger and desperate hope. Around them, the tunnels of the Colosseum seemed to press closer, as if the very stones were listening. But Livia did not flinch, did not step away. She had found Marcus once, against all odds and reason. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Then we will go to him, she said simply, and we will make him answer for what he has done. Marcus pulled away from Livia's touch, his expression tortured. You cannot go to the Emperor. You do not understand what you are asking. He does not answer to anyone, least of all a gladiator's widow demanding explanations. Then how? Livia demanded, frustration and fear warring in her voice. How do we break this curse? There must be a way. Curses can be undone. Transformations can be reversed. Not this one, Marcus said flatly. He moved to a torch on the wall and pulled it from its bracket, gesturing for her to follow him deeper into the tunnels. Come. If you truly want to understand what I have become, I will show you. But once you see Livia, you may wish you had never found me. They descended through passages that grew progressively darker and more oppressive, the air thick with the smell of animals and old blood and something else. Something chemical and wrong that made Livia's eyes water. The sounds of the city above faded until all she could hear was their footsteps echoing off stone walls and the distant roar of caged beasts. Finally, Marcus stopped before a heavy iron door secured with chains and a lock that looked designed to keep something in rather than keep intruders out. He produced a key from beneath his armor and opened it, the hinges screaming in protest. Beyond lay a chamber that made Livia's stomach turn. It was large, perhaps 30 feet across, with a ceiling lost in shadow. The walls were lined with cages, and in those cages were creatures that should not exist. A man with the head of a bull, his eyes human and filled with endless suffering. A woman whose lower body had been replaced with that of a serpent, her scales gleaming in the torchlight as she hissed and struck at the bars. A child, God's, a child, whose arms had become the wings of some great bird, the feathers matted and broken from repeated attempts to fly in too small confines. This is where they keep us, Marcus said quietly, the Emperor's failed experiments. Those who did not survive the transformation with their minds intact, or whose bodies changed in ways that made them too monstrous to use as soldiers. We are the successes, Livia, the beasts who can still pass for human, who can still follow orders and perform missions. These, he gestured to the cages, these are the failures. Livia felt bile rise in her throat. How many? She whispered. Dozens, Marcus replied. Perhaps more. The Emperor's alchemists have been perfecting their methods for years, experimenting on gladiators and criminals and slaves, anyone whose death would not be questioned. Most die during the transformation. Some survive but lose their humanity completely, and a few, like me, emerge changed but still capable of reason. He led her past the cages to the far wall, where symbols had been carved into the stone, ancient writing in languages Livia did not recognize. mixed with diagrams that showed the human body overlaid with animal forms. "This is the formula they used on me," Marcus said, pointing to one particularly complex set of symbols. Blood of the Numidian lion for strength, essence of the eagle for enhanced vision, regenerative properties extracted from certain lizards found only in Egypt, and binding agents, alchemical compounds that force the human body to accept what it should reject. "But why?" Livia asked, still struggling to comprehend. "Why create such things? What purpose could justify this abomination?" Marcus's laugh was bitter. "Control. Power. The Emperor wants warriors who cannot be killed, who will never question orders, who can accomplish tasks that normal soldiers cannot. Imagine an enforcer who can track a target by scent alone, who can heal from wounds that would kill an ordinary man, who possesses strength enough to tear through doors and walls. We are the ultimate weapons, Livia, and we are bound to his will by more than just loyalty or fear." He pulled aside the collar of his armor, revealing his neck. There, just above his collarbone, was a mark, a brand that glowed faintly with inner light, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. "This is the binding sigil, placed on us during the transformation, powered by the same alchemical forces that changed our bodies. It connects us to the Emperor, allows him to know our location at all times, to compel obedience when necessary, to inflict pain if we attempt to resist." Livia reached out to touch the mark, and Marcus flinched. "It burns when triggered," he explained. "Not physical fire, but something worse. Pain that reaches into your soul, that makes you wish for death even though death is denied to you." "There must be a way to remove it," Livia insisted. "If it was placed by alchemy, then alchemy can unmake it." "Perhaps," Marcus said, though his tone suggested he did not believe it. "But the Emperor's alchemists are the only ones who know the full formula, and they guard their secrets zealously. Even if we could find someone with the knowledge to attempt a reversal, the process would likely kill me. Truly kill me this time, beyond even the regeneration to bring me back." He moved to one of the empty cages and sat down heavily on the stone floor, suddenly looking exhausted despite his supernatural vitality. "I have been like this for 5 years, Livia. 5 years of being more animal than man, of fighting the beast within every moment of every day. During the full moon, I lose that fight completely. They chain me down here in the deepest cell, and I howl and rage and try to tear myself apart. When the moon wanes and I return to myself, I remember everything I did, every violent impulse, every monstrous thought. It is a living hell." Livia knelt beside him, taking his cold hands in hers. "Then we will find a way to end it. If the curse cannot be broken, if the transformation cannot be reversed, then we will find another solution." "What solution?" Marcus asked, his golden eyes searching her face. "What answer could possibly free me from this?" "I do not know yet," Livia admitted, "but I know I will not give up. I have already lost you once, Marcus. I have spent 5 years mourning a man who is not truly dead. Now that I know you live, I will not abandon you to this fate." From one of the cages, the bull-headed man spoke, his voice surprisingly human despite his monstrous appearance. "She speaks bravely, Gladiator, but bravery alone will not break the Emperor's chains. I have been here for 3 years, trying every day to find a way to reverse what was done to me. There is none. This is what we are now, and this is what we will remain until death finally claims us for real." "How long does that take?" Livia asked. "You said you cannot truly die, but surely—" "We age," Marcus explained. "Slowly, much more slowly than normal humans, but we do age. The oldest of the beasts has been alive for nearly 30 years since his transformation. He looks perhaps 40, though he was 20 when they changed him. Eventually, we will grow old and die, but it could take a century or more. A century of living as a monster," Livia thought with horror. "A century of being the Emperor's slave, of fighting the beast within, of existing in this twilight between human and animal. It was a fate worse than death." "Then we have time," she said firmly. "Time to search for a solution. Time to find someone who might know how to break the binding or reverse the transformation. I will not accept that this is permanent." Marcus looked at her with an expression that mixed love and sorrow. "You always were an optimist. Even when we had nothing, when I was just a slave with no hope of freedom, you believed we could build a life together. And we did, for a few brief years before the arena took me. But this, Livia, this is different. This is not poverty or hardship that can be overcome with determination and hard work. This is magic and alchemy, forces beyond our understanding or control. Then we will learn to understand them, Livia replied stubbornly. We will find the alchemists who know the formula. We will discover the secrets of the binding sigil. You will do nothing, came a new voice from the doorway, cold and commanding, except leave these tunnels immediately and forget what you have seen here. Livia spun around to find Quintus standing in the entrance, flanked by two other enforcers. His expression was hard, his hand resting on his sword hilt. The Emperor has been informed of your presence, widow. He is displeased that you have discovered our existence, displeased that Marcus allowed you into the breeding chambers. Breeding chambers? Livia repeated, confused. Where we create the next generation of beasts, Quintus said flatly. Or did you think this was merely about transforming adult warriors? No, the Emperor's ambitions are far grander. He wants an entire legion of soldiers like us, grown from birth to accept the transformation, trained from childhood to serve without question. The experiments you see here are merely the beginning. Marcus had risen to his feet, his body tense with barely controlled rage. You go too far, Quintus. These are prisoners, not breeding stock. They are whatever the Emperor says they are, Quintus replied. As are you, as are we all. And now the Emperor wishes to see both of you, immediately. He has questions about your reunion, and he is not known for his patience. Livia felt fear coil in her stomach, but she forced herself to stand straight, to meet Quintus's gaze without flinching. I am not afraid of the Emperor. Then you are a fool, Quintus said. But foolish or wise, you will come. The Emperor does not make requests. He gives orders, and those orders are obeyed. He gestured to the other enforcers, who moved to flank Marcus and Livia. Move, and do not attempt anything foolish. Marcus may be difficult to kill, but you, widow, are very much mortal. Remember that. They were escorted through the tunnels, upstairs that led not to the arena floor, but to a different section of the complex entirely. Corridors lined with rich tapestries, rooms filled with expensive furnishings, chambers that spoke of wealth and power. This was not the working underbelly of the Colosseum, but something else, a private residence hidden within the structure, the Emperor's personal quarters beneath the arena. And somewhere in those chambers, the man who had created the beasts, who held Marcus's life in his hands, who could end or extend their suffering with a single word, waited to pass judgment on a widow who had dared to reclaim what Rome had stolen from her. The chamber they were brought to defied everything Livia had expected. She had imagined something oppressive and dark, a throne room designed to intimidate and dominate. Instead, she found herself in a space that was almost scholarly, walls lined with scrolls and texts, tables covered with alchemical equipment and anatomical drawings, a brazier burning with chemicals that produced strange colored flames. And in the center of it all, studying a diagram of the human body overlaid with various beast forms, stood Emperor Hadrian Maximus. He was younger than Livia had imagined, perhaps 40, with sharp features and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. He wore a simple toga rather than imperial purple, and his hands were stained with ink and what might have been blood. When he looked up at their entrance, his expression showed not anger, but curiosity, as if Livia were a particularly interesting specimen he had not expected to examine today. The widow, he said, his voice cultured and cold. The woman who should have remained ignorant, who should have accepted her husband's death and moved on with her life. Yet here you stand, having discovered my greatest secret, having seen what no outsider should ever witness. Livia met his gaze despite her fear. You stole my husband from me. You let me believe he was dead while you turned him into a monster for your own purposes. What did you expect me to do when I discovered the truth? Hadrian smiled slightly, as if amused by her defiance. Most would have run. Most would have convinced themselves they had imagined what they saw, would have chosen comfortable delusion over dangerous truth. But you are not most people, are you? You tracked Marcus into the deepest tunnels, confronted him, demanded explanations. That takes courage, or foolishness. I have not yet decided which. He moved closer, studying her with the same clinical interest he might show a laboratory subject. Tell me, widow, what do you see when you look at your husband now? Do you see the man you married, or do you see the beast he has become? I see Marcus, Livia said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. Changed, cursed, suffering, but still Marcus. Still the man I love. Love, Hadrian repeated, as if testing the word. How sentimental, and ultimately irrelevant. What you call love changes nothing. Marcus belongs to Rome now. His body, his strength, his very life, all are mine by right of transformation. I pulled him from death itself, remade him into something greater than the slave he was. He should be grateful. Grateful? Marcus spoke for the first time since entering the chamber, his voice tight with controlled fury. You trapped me in a nightmare. You made me something that is neither man nor beast, that belongs nowhere, that must fight its own nature every moment of every day. And you call that a gift? I call it purpose, Hadrian replied coolly. You were a gladiator, Marcus. A slave who killed for the entertainment of crowds, whose existence served no greater goal than momentary spectacle. Now you serve the empire itself. You carry out missions that safeguard Rome's interests, eliminate threats that conventional soldiers cannot handle, operate in shadows where normal men would fail. I gave you meaning beyond mere survival. He turned back to Livia. But we are not here to debate philosophy. We are here to address a problem. You have seen too much, know too much. Standard protocol would be to eliminate you, ensure your silence permanently. However, he paused, his expression thoughtful. I find myself intrigued by your determination, by your refusal to accept your husband's transformation as final. It suggests a quality I have found useful in the past, stubborn loyalty that persists despite overwhelming evidence that surrender would be wiser. What are you proposing? Livia asked warily. Hadrian moved to one of his tables and picked up a scroll, unrolling it to reveal a complex diagram. The transformation that created Marcus and the other beasts is powerful but imperfect. Approximately 30% of subjects die during the process. Another 40% survive but lose their human consciousness entirely, becoming true monsters that must be destroyed or caged. Only 30% emerge as Marcus did, changed but still rational, still capable of following orders. He looked directly at Livia. The factor that determines success or failure remains elusive. We have tried various selection criteria: physical strength, combat experience, age, bloodline, but none reliably predict who will survive with their mind intact. However, I have developed a theory, one I believe you might help me test. I will not help you create more monsters, Livia said. You misunderstand, Hadrian replied. I am not asking you to assist with transformations. I am proposing something different entirely. You see, the beasts who retain their humanity share one common trait. They all had something worth surviving for. A goal, a purpose, a reason to cling to their human consciousness, even as their bodies were remade. Marcus survived, I believe, because some part of him refused to die while you remained in the world. He set down the scroll and faced them both. So here is my bargain. I will allow you to remain alive, to keep your dangerous knowledge, on one condition. You must help me control Marcus. He grows more unstable with each passing month, the beast within him gaining strength. During the last full moon, it took 6 men to subdue him, and 2 were seriously injured. I cannot have my most effective enforcer becoming a liability. You want me to tame him? Livia asked, disgust evident in her voice. To help you keep him enslaved? I want you to keep him sane, Hadrian corrected. The binding sigil controls his body, compels his obedience, but it cannot control his mind. That requires something else: connection, purpose, a reason to hold on to humanity. You are that reason, widow. You are what keeps Marcus from becoming a true monster. He gestured to Marcus. Without you, he will eventually lose himself completely. The man you love will disappear, leaving only the beast. But with you present, anchoring him to his human identity, he might maintain his balance indefinitely. You give me stable enforcers, and I give you continued access to your husband. Both sides gain something they need. Marcus made a sound of protest. Livia, do not agree to this. He is manipulating you, using your love for me to make you complicit in his experiments. Quiet, Hadrian said, and the binding sigil on Marcus's neck flared with light. Marcus gasped, his body going rigid with pain, his golden eyes wide with agony. The emperor held him there for 3 heartbeats, demonstrating his absolute control before releasing the compulsion. Marcus collapsed to one knee, breathing hard, and Livia rushed to him despite Quintus's warning growl. She helped him stand, feeling how his body trembled, seeing the shame and rage warring in his expression. You see, Hadrian said calmly, I do not need your cooperation, Marcus. I can force your obedience whenever necessary, but forced obedience creates unstable soldiers. Willing service, or service motivated by something you actually care about, produces far better results. So I make this offer to you both. Work with me willingly, and you can be together. Refuse, and Livia dies while you watch, and then you will serve me anyway. but with nothing left to anchor you to humanity. The choice was no choice at all, and they all knew it. Livia looked at Marcus, saw the helpless fury in his golden eyes, the knowledge that they had no leverage, no power, no way to refuse without losing everything. "What exactly would you require of me?" Livia asked slowly. "Your presence," Hadrian said. "Regular contact with Marcus, enough to maintain his psychological stability. You would live in quarters near the arena, would be available when his transformation threatens to overwhelm his reason. You would be essentially his anchor, the human connection that reminds him why he should remain human despite the beast within. And in exchange, you live. Marcus remains as stable as possible. And perhaps if you prove particularly useful, I might even allow you certain privileges. Better housing, a stipend, the freedom to move about the city. You would become, in essence, part of my household. Not quite slave, not quite free, but protected and provided for." Livia thought of the 5 years she had spent mourning, the emptiness that had defined her existence, the desperate letter she had never wanted to write. She thought of Marcus as she had last seen him before his final fight, nervous but hopeful. And she thought of Marcus as he was now, golden-eyed and cursed, trapped between human and beast, suffering in ways she could barely comprehend. If she refused, she died, and Marcus would have nothing. But if she agreed, at least they would have each other. Even if their reunion came with chains, neither could break. "I agree," she said quietly. "I will help you keep Marcus stable, but I have one condition of my own." Hadrian's eyebrow rose. "You are not in a position to make demands, widow. Nevertheless, I make this one. You will continue searching for a way to reverse the transformation. You will not give up on finding a cure. That is my price." For a long moment, Hadrian simply looked at her. Then, to her surprise, he nodded. "Very well. I will continue my research into reversal methods. Though I warn you, success is unlikely. The changes run deep, woven into the very fabric of their being. But I will try, if it keeps you cooperative and Marcus stable." He gestured to Quintus. "Show them to the quarters I have prepared. The widow will remain there, and Marcus will visit as his duties allow. We will begin the new arrangement immediately." As they were led away, Livia felt Marcus's cold hand find hers, squeezing gently. She had bought them time, had kept them together, but at a cost she could not yet fully calculate. They were alive, they were together, but they were also bound to the Emperor's will, complicit in the very system that had created Marcus's curse. And freedom, true freedom, seemed more distant than ever. The quarters Hadrian provided were surprisingly comfortable, a suite of 3 rooms in a building adjacent to the Colosseum, furnished with better furniture than Livia had seen in years. There was a proper bed instead of a straw pallet, a brazier that provided warmth, windows with real glass overlooking the city. It was a gilded cage, but compared to her previous dwelling, it felt almost luxurious. Almost, because luxury meant nothing when purchased with complicity in evil. 3 weeks passed in uneasy routine. Marcus came each evening after his duties were complete, still wearing his black armor, his golden eyes dim with exhaustion. They would sit together, sometimes talking, sometimes simply existing in each other's presence, both acutely aware of the invisible chains binding them to the Emperor's will. Livia learned the extent of Marcus's curse during those quiet evenings, how his senses were so acute that normal city sounds became overwhelming cacophony, how his strength made him dangerous, even in affection. He had to consciously restrain himself to avoid crushing her hand, how the hunger for raw meat plagued him constantly, a craving only partially satisfied by the bloody portions the Emperor's kitchens provided. But worst of all was the approaching full moon. "It will happen in 3 days," Marcus told her when the moon was already swelling toward fullness. His voice was strained, his body tense. "I can feel it already, the beast growing stronger. My thoughts become less clear, more instinctual. The urge to hunt, to kill, becomes almost overwhelming." "What will they do with you?" Livia asked. "Chain me in the deepest cell beneath the arena," Marcus said. "Silver chains blessed by priests, reinforced with alchemical bindings. They will lock me away where I cannot harm anyone, and I will remain there until the moon wanes. It is the worst part of this curse, knowing that for 3 nights I will be nothing but an animal." He looked at her with desperate, golden eyes. "I need you to promise me something. If I ever escape during the transformation, if the chains fail and I come hunting, you must run. Do not try to reach me with words or memories. The beast knows no mercy, recognizes no love. It will kill you without hesitation." I promise. Livia lied, knowing she would never abandon him, even to save her own life. The full moon rose on a night when Rome seemed to hold its breath. Livia stood at her window, watching the silver disk climb above the city's rooftops, painting everything in ghostly light. Somewhere beneath the Colosseum, Marcus was being secured in his cell, chains wrapping around him while priests chanted protective wards. She waited, listening to the city's night sounds. An hour passed. 2. The moon climbed higher, its light growing stronger. And then faintly she heard it, a howl that seemed to come from the very foundations of the earth, a sound neither fully human nor fully animal. Marcus. The transformation had taken him. Livia paced her rooms, unable to rest, unable to think of anything but what Marcus must be experiencing. The loss of control, the complete surrender to animal instinct, the horror of being trapped inside his own mind while his body raged against its chains. Shortly before midnight, she heard running footsteps in the corridor outside, then urgent voices. Something was wrong. Livia opened her door to find Quintus and 2 other enforcers rushing past, weapons drawn. What happened? She called after them. Quintus stopped, turning back with reluctance. Marcus broke free. The chains failed, we do not know how, but he tore through silver and alchemy both. He is loose in the tunnels beneath the arena. Horror flooded through Livia. You have to find him. Before he reaches the surface and begins killing civilians. Quintus finished grimly. Yes, widow, we are aware. Get back inside and bar your door. If he breaks through to this level, you will be his first target. The beast knows your scent. He ran on before Livia could respond, leaving her standing in the doorway with her heart pounding. Marcus was loose. The beast was free. She should have listened, should have barred the door, hidden, waited for the enforcers to recapture him. But all she could think about was Marcus, lost somewhere in the beast's fury, aware but unable to stop himself. Livia made her decision instantly. She grabbed her cloak and a single oil lamp, then slipped out and headed not away from the danger, but toward it, descending the stairs to the tunnels beneath the Colosseum. The deeper she went, the more she heard the chaos, shouting men, clash of weapons, sounds of something large and powerful smashing through barriers. She followed the sounds, moving carefully, her lamp held high, until she reached a tunnel section showing signs of violence. Claw marks scored the walls. Blood stained the floor. Broken silver chains lay scattered. Marcus, she called softly, knowing it was foolish, knowing the beast would not respond. But she had to try. Marcus, I know you are here. I know you can hear me somewhere inside. You need to fight this. Remember who you are. A low growl answered her from the shadows ahead. Then movement, and the beast emerged into the lamplight. It was Marcus, and yet not Marcus. His body had changed further. Muscles swollen with unnatural strength, hands tipped with gleaming claws, his face distorted with a muzzle showing fangs designed for tearing flesh. But his eyes were the same, those terrible golden eyes, now filled with nothing but animal hunger and rage. The beast looked at her, and for a heartbeat, Livia thought she saw recognition flicker. Then it snarled and began to advance. Marcus, Livia said, her voice steady despite her terror. Remember who you were. Remember the farm we dreamed of. Remember the morning before your last fight, how you held me and told me you loved me. Remember, Marcus. Please remember. The beast paused, its head tilting as if trying to process words it could barely understand. Then it shook itself, the moment passing, and lunged forward. Livia did not run. She stood her ground, spreading her arms wide, offering no resistance. If you are going to kill me, then do it. But know that I do not blame you. Know that I love you. Whatever you have become, know that even in death, I will never stop loving you. The beast's claws were inches from her throat when it stopped. Its golden eyes met hers, and something shifted, the animal fury receding, replaced by confusion and then recognition. Marcus's consciousness was fighting back, clawing up from the depths of instinct and rage, drawn by her voice and her complete refusal to fear him. Livia, the beast forced out, its voice distorted but unmistakably Marcus's. Run, cannot, hold, long. I am not running, Livia said, reaching up slowly to touch the beast's face, feeling coarse fur and overheated flesh. Remember who you are, Marcus. You are not this creature. You are a man, my husband. Come back to me. Fight the beast. Come back. The transformation was visible, a ripple passing through the creature's body as human consciousness reasserted itself. The muzzle retracted slightly. The claws shortened, the swollen muscles deflated. It was not complete. He still looked more beast than man, but his eyes cleared, intelligence and humanity returning. "You should not be here," Marcus managed to say, his breathing ragged. "Should not risk yourself for me. Where else would I be?" Livia replied, tears streaming down her face. "You are my husband. I will always come for you, no matter what form you wear." Behind them, torches appeared as Quintus and the other enforcers arrived, weapons ready, but they stopped at the sight. The beast kneeling before the widow, her hand on its face, both of them weeping. "Impossible," Quintus breathed. "No one has ever brought them back during the full moon." "Love is stronger than curses," Livia said simply. "Stronger than alchemy or magic or the Emperor's will. Remember that, Quintus. Remember what you have seen here tonight." The moon continued its journey across the sky, and Marcus's grip on his human consciousness held. It was not perfect. She could see him struggling, fighting the beast that wanted to surge forward. But with her presence, her voice, her steady refusal to abandon him, he maintained control. When dawn finally broke and the moon's power waned, Marcus collapsed in exhaustion, his body reverting fully to its daylight form. Livia caught him, cradling his head in her lap. "The Emperor will want to know about this," Quintus said finally. "Then tell him," Livia replied. "Tell him that love broke what his chains could not hold. Tell him that Marcus is mine, not Rome's." Marcus stirred in her arms, his golden eyes opening. "You saved me. You brought me back from the darkness. We saved each other," Livia corrected gently. "And we will continue to save each other, every day for as long as this curse lasts." As the sun rose over Rome, painting the city in gold and crimson, widow and beast remained together, having discovered that even the darkest curse could be endured when love refused to surrender. The Emperor summoned them at dawn before the city fully woke, before the news of Marcus's escape and Livia's intervention could spread beyond the enforcers who had witnessed it. They were brought to the same chamber as before, but this time Hadrian's expression held something new, not anger, but fascination mixed with calculation. "Explain," he commanded simply. "Quintus tells me you brought Marcus back from full transformation, that you spoke to the beast and it listened. That is impossible. Yet 5 witnesses confirm it happened." "Love is not bound by your rules of possibility," Livia said, her exhaustion making her bolder than wisdom would advise. "Marcus heard me because some part of him never stopped being human. I simply reminded him of who he was." Hadrian studied her for a long moment, then turned to Marcus. "Can you do it again? Control the transformation even during the full moon?" "I do not know," Marcus admitted. "It took everything I had to hold on, and even then, I could only manage it because Livia was there. Without her, I would have been lost completely." "Fascinating," Hadrian murmured, making notes. "The emotional connection acts as an anchor, overriding the alchemical compulsion. This changes things. If your widow can control you during transformation, she becomes far more valuable." "I am not a tool for you to use," Livia said sharply. "Marcus is not your weapon to perfect. You are whatever I say you are," Hadrian replied coldly. "I could have you killed with a word. Your continued existence depends entirely on my tolerance." He moved closer. "But I am not without reason. What you demonstrated last night has value. A beast who can maintain control even during full moon is exponentially more useful, so I'm prepared to offer you something more than mere survival." "What?" Marcus asked warily. "Freedom," Hadrian said, and the word hung in the air like a promise and a trap. "Not immediately, but in time. Serve me well for 5 years. Prove that this control can be maintained. Help me perfect the transformation. Do this, and I will release you both. I will remove the binding sigil, provide gold to purchase land far from Rome, grant you the peaceful life you once dreamed of." "You lie," Livia said flatly. Hadrian smiled slightly. "In 5 years, I will have refined the process sufficiently to create dozens more beasts. Marcus will no longer be irreplaceable, and having a visible example of redemption will make it easier to recruit future subjects." He pulled out a contract written on fine parchment. 5 years. Marcus continues as my enforcer. You, Livia, help us understand how your presence affects transformation. In exchange, you both go free." Marcus and Livia exchanged glances. They both knew it was likely a deception, that Hadrian would find reasons to extend their service. But it was also the only offer they would receive, and 5 years of hope was better than an eternity of despair. "I have a condition," Marcus said suddenly. "The other beasts, the ones in cages, the failures, they deserve mercy. Either restore their humanity or grant them a clean death." Hadrian considered this. Very well. I will task my alchemists with developing humane termination for those too far gone, and attempt rehabilitation for those who show potential. Then we have an agreement. Hadrian pushed the contract forward. Sign here, both of you, your blood, specifically. They signed, pressing their fingers to parchment and leaving marks that glowed faintly before fading. It felt like selling their souls, but it also felt like the first real choice they had made since Marcus's transformation. The weeks that followed established a new pattern. Marcus continued his duties, but now Livia accompanied him, her presence helping him maintain control. She also worked with the alchemists, interviewing surviving beasts, understanding what allowed some to retain humanity while others lost it. 3 months after signing the contract, rebellion erupted in Rome's streets. It began in the slums where discontent had been building for years. A spark was all it took. A young boy killed by soldiers for stealing bread. By nightfall, barricades had been erected, buildings were burning, and angry mobs surged through streets demanding justice. The emperor's response was immediate and ruthless. He deployed the Praetorian Guard with orders to crush the rebellion, and he summoned his beasts, commanding them to strike fear so deep into the rebels' hearts that they would scatter and never dare rise again. Marcus was among those called to serve. The binding sigil burned on his neck as Hadrian gave the order. Go into the streets. Kill anyone who resists. Show Rome why they should fear to defy their emperor. But as Marcus stood in the armory selecting weapons, Livia touched his arm. You do not have to do this. The binding compels your body, but I have seen you fight it. Your mind is still your own. If I refuse, the sigil will force me anyway, Marcus said, and it will hurt me until I comply. Then let it hurt, Livia said fiercely. But do not become the monster they want you to be. Not for them, not even for our freedom. Marcus looked at her with his golden eyes, seeing the woman who had refused to abandon him even when he had become a beast. And he knew she was right. There were some things worse than pain, some compromises that destroyed the soul more thoroughly than any curse. If I defy the emperor, our agreement is void, he said quietly, and he may kill you to punish me. Then let him try, Livia replied. I would rather die free than live as a slave to evil. Outside, the city burned. Inside, Marcus made his choice. He went into the streets as commanded, but when he reached the barricades where rebels fought desperately, he did not attack them. Instead, he turned on the Praetorian Guards who had been slaughtering civilians, using his supernatural strength not to enforce the emperor's will but to oppose it. The binding sigil flared immediately, sending agony through Marcus's body that made him scream. But he fought through the pain, forcing his body to move even as the alchemical compulsion tried to paralyze him. He had endured the transformation, had survived the beast's rage. This was just another battle, another moment where he had to choose who he was. The other beasts felt it too, the moment when one of their own defied the binding. Some collapsed immediately, but others, inspired by Marcus's rebellion, found strength they had not known they possessed. Quintus was the second to turn. Then others followed, and suddenly the emperor's ultimate weapons were fighting against him. The battle that followed was chaos. Marcus fought with fury born not of the beast, but of righteous rage. Rage at the years of slavery, at the curse forced upon him, at the emperor who had stolen his death. Livia found him in the midst of it, fighting through the chaos to reach his side. "Marcus!" she screamed, and he turned, his face splattered with blood, his golden eyes blazing. But then he smiled, his human smile, tired and bloodied but genuine. "You should not be here," he said. "And yet here I am," she replied. They fought their way toward the palace together, knowing that if the emperor lived, this rebellion would fail. The only way to truly break free was to end the source of their curse. They reached the emperor's inner sanctum. Hadrian stood waiting, holding a vial of glowing liquid. "Strike me, and your heart will stop. That is the ultimate protection I built into the sigil. Then I will die free," Marcus replied, advancing despite the agony. But before Marcus could strike, Livia moved. She was not bound by any sigil. She was simply a woman with a knife and a desperate need to save the man she loved. The blade took Hadrian in the throat. The emperor fell, his eyes wide with surprise. Within moments, he was dead, and with his death, something changed. The binding sigils on every beast throughout the city flared once, then faded to nothing more than scars. The connection broken. Marcus collapsed, the pain suddenly gone. He looked up at Livia, who stood over the Emperor's body with blood on her hands. "You freed us all," Marcus whispered. "No," Livia corrected. "We freed each other. That is what we have always done." The rebellion succeeded that night. With the Emperor dead and his beasts freed from compulsion, the corrupt government collapsed. It was chaos, but also the birth of something new. Marcus and Livia left Rome 3 days later, carrying nothing but each other. The curse remained. Marcus would always be part beast, would always bear golden eyes and supernatural strength. But he was free. They were both free. They found their farm eventually far from the city in a valley where no one knew their names. They built a life there, simple and hard-won, marked by Marcus's curse but defined by their refusal to let it defeat them. And on certain nights, when the moon rose red, travelers would see 2 figures standing together beneath the stars. A woman with her hand on the face of something neither quite man nor quite beast, both scarred but bound together by love that had proven stronger than any curse. The gladiator had died in the arena 5 years ago, but the man had returned, broken and changed but ultimately free.